Now we're at the summary session for Module 1, Ethics and Trust in the Investment Profession. Think of this module as the reason behind everything else you'll learn in the CFA program. It's not just a bunch of definitions. It's the philosophical and practical foundation for your career. Today, we'll walk through the mind map you've seen, connecting all the dots, so you can see the big picture clearly. Let's get started. Part 1. Introduction to Ethics. This session gives us the language we need to talk intelligently about ethics. 1.1. The definition of ethics. What are we really talking about? Ethics refers to the set of moral principles or beliefs that help us distinguish right from wrong, good from bad, and what we ought to do from what we ought not to do. The key components, including those that form the foundation, lead to two critical, exam-testable documents. And what is the Code of Ethics? These are high-level, aspirational documents that state an organization's core values and serve as a general guide for behavior. And what are the standards of conduct or professional standards? These are the specific, actionable rules derived from the code. They define the minimum acceptable behavior for members. So, what is the link between the Code of Ethics and the standards of behavior? A code of ethics without standards is just a statement of ideals. Standards without an ethical foundation are just a checklist. Together, they form the operational framework for a profession. When it comes to Part B, Ethics and Professionalism, which is 1.2, it's about building trust in the vocation. The key insight here is that not every job is a profession. A true profession, like investment management, is characterized by specialized knowledge and a high barrier to entry, a commitment to serving society over mere commercial gain, and self-regulation through a shared code and standards. How does a profession establish trust? It's not automatic. It builds trust systematically through methodical, standardized behavior, placing client interests first, which is the fiduciary duty, requiring continuing education and monitoring the conduct of its members. The CFA Institute is the governing body for the global investment profession. The most important point in Part 1 is the challenges to ethical conduct. Knowing the rules isn't enough. We must understand the psychological checks. The first is overconfidence bias. The fourth is the belief that our own moral character is stronger than others, making us underestimate risk and situational pressure. The second is situational influence, which is external. Pressures that powerfully shape behavior. This includes peer pressure and loyalty to colleagues or the firm. The bystander effect and monetary incentives that make us focus on short-term gain. The key exam takeaway is that no single factor is always the most important. The relative influence varies. Part 2, Ethical versus Legal Standards. We should understand the boundary between them. This is a fundamental and frequently tested distinction. Let's visualize it with the Venn diagram from the curriculum. The overlap, which is in the middle. Many actions are both legal and ethical. This is the ideal. Legal but unethical. This is the critical zone for professionals. An action may not violate a specific law, but can clearly breach ethical duties. Ethical but illegal. Rare but possible when a moral imperative conflicts with an unjust or specific local law. The crucial point is that ethical conduct goes beyond the legal standard. The law is a minimum baseline for society. Our professional codes and standards represent a higher benchmark. We must comply with both. But when they conflict, the higher standard governs us, our conduct. Relying solely on the law is insufficient because laws are reactive, can be circumvented, and vary by jurisdictions. 3. The ethical decision-making framework. When faced with a gray area, you need assistance, not just intuition. The framework is your step-by-step guide. First, identify. Gather all relevant facts. Identify all stakeholders, such as the client, employer, market, and yourself. Determine which ethical principles and duties are involved, and spot any conflicts of interest. And then consider. Analyze the situational influences at play. Seek additional guidance. Brainstorm alternative actions. Next, design a plan. Choose the course of action that best upholds your ethical duties. Then, implement your decision with conviction. Reflect. After everything, review the outcome. What worked? What would you do differently? This turns experience into wisdom. Think of this framework as your own privilege checklist for ethical decision making. It ensures you don't miss any critical factors. Finally, we're going to connect the dots for the exam. Let's see how all of these fit together. Module 1 starts by defining our purpose. It then establishes our boundaries, emphasizing that our duty is significant. Finally, it provides a practical tool, the framework, to navigate complex situations. On the exam, you might be asked to distinguish between the code of ethics and the standard of conduct. The initial first part, to identify the key characteristics of a profession or effective methods to build trust. The subsequent second part, to recognize clear examples of overconfidence and various situational influences and external factors. This part, to compare and contrast ethical and legal standards, which is shown in the diagram. To apply a step-by-step ethical decision-making framework. The last part. Remember, this module isn't about memorizing isolated facts. It's about building a mindset. You are being trained not just as a technician of finance, but as a fiduciary, and as a steward of market integrity. Your key takeaways are as follows. You are joining a profession bound by a shared code and a higher standard. Ethics go beyond laws. Your duty is to the established standard. Use the framework to think systematically, not emotionally. Let's apply all the concepts to a quick scenario. You are a junior at least. Your team is pitching for a major underwriting deal with Company X. Your direct supervisor, who is leading the pitch, tells you, our preliminary model suggests that Company X is fairly valued, but for the pitch book, bump the growth assumption up by 2% to make the valuation more attractive. It's just a minor adjustment for marketing. Everyone does it. But is it really a minor adjustment for marketing? So what should we do? Let's apply the concept. First, legal versus. Ethical. The trick might not be strictly illegal fraud in a criminal sense at this early stage, but it is clearly unethical. It violates objectivity and independence because the model is being biased. By providing an artificially inflated valuation, and also the document is a misrepresentation, and the potential market manipulation puts the firm's interest in winning the deal first. Both the duty to provide honest analysis. Let's use the ethical decision-making framework to figure this out. First, identify the facts. For example, supervisors request model data, and who are our stakeholders? For example, the client, Company X, your fund, future investors, and yourself. What ethical principles are involved? For example, integrity, objectivity, and recognizing conflicts of interest, like your duty to be accurate versus loyalty to your boss, or wanting to keep your job. Then we should consider situational influences. Major pressure from a supervisor, loyalty, monetary incentives, if any bonuses are involved. The guidance is that the standard on misrepresentation is clear, so what's the alternative? Alternative 1, refuse and explain why, ethically. Second, suggest adding a disclaimer in the bridgeboard. And lastly, escalate the issue to compliance. Next, make your decision and take action. The ethical choice is to politely but firmly explain why you cannot alter the model, and suggest either the second or third alternative. Finally, reflect. Afterward, consider whether the pressure was worse than you expected. How can you build a reputation for integrity to make these kinds of conversations easier in the future?